I'm Tracy with MeatRx. I'm here today with a great success story with our friend Chris Masterjohn. He combines his scientific expertise with out-of-the-box thinking to translate complex science into new practical ideas that you can use to help yourself on your journey toward vibrant health. He earned his PhD in nutritional sciences from the University of Connecticut in the summer of 2012. Hi, John. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Chris Masterjohn.
Yeah.
I got that mixed up. But anyway, I wanted to ask you about your journey on diet, basically. Can you give me some information about that?
Sure. Well, we could go back to when I was a kid. I had standard American diet, and then when I was a teenager, I was more in control of my diet. So my typical breakfast was 2 Pop-Tarts. I generally got classy and upgraded to toaster strudels, and would have 2 tall glasses of Coca-Cola and a big glass of iced tea from a powdered mix, and then go to school, smoke 3 cigarettes. That was my life at the time. I didn't like the school lunch, so I'd pick at the salad and the rolls. Then I'd get a good dinner when I got home, that my parents cooked. I really got interested in health later when I saw my mom make a remarkable recovery from fibromyalgia with a very complex approach that involved different dietary strategies, as well as yoga and herbs and traditional Chinese medicine and all that. And that inspired me to really think about the power that nutrition and lifestyle could have in solving problems that medicine currently didn't have an answer for. And so, being so enthusiastic about diet, I went on a very rocky roaded journey that involved first going vegan. And so I had read a book called Diet for a New America that basically alleged that eating meat was responsible for most chronic diseases, was responsible for environmental devastation, and was responsible for terrible animal welfare problems. And that if you wanted to save the animals, save the planet, and save yourself, you should go vegan. And so at first I just went vegetarian, but I brought my girlfriend along with me on this ride at the time, and she convinced me that, she read the book and she was like, why did we just go vegetarian? We really should go vegan. There was a band that I listened to at that time, Propaganda, that had a line, meat is still murder and dairy is still rape. So if you don't want to be a murderer, why would you be a rapist, right? And so I went vegan, and things were not good. So I would say that, I don't know, a few months into it, probably one of the clearest things that was happening to my health was just my digestive system was terrible. I was often I think I gave myself SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I didn't know what that was at the time. I was just often on the floor trying to do yoga positions to relieve gas pockets that were causing a lot of pain and stuff like that. But probably the worst thing that happened to me was that my mental health just really took a nosedive. So I had anxiety disorders going back to when I was maybe 13 years old, and they got tremendously worse. They were a nuisance to me before, but they really became like the central feature of my life that was really starting to interfere with my ability to carry on in school and just hold down the fort. I often couldn't eat. I remember one time I was obsessed with the idea that my food was tampered with. And I remember I was trying to eat a veggie burger, and I just looked for some signs of tampering in the seal around this veggie burger. And I just kept looking and kept looking and kept looking until finally I found one. I probably punctured the thing myself by spending 20 minutes looking for signs of tampering. But then I thought, I don't know, maybe it's poisoned or drugged or something. And so I remember I threw the veggie burger across the kitchen in anger. And then I went to my bed and cried because I couldn't eat anything and I was so hungry. So at that point I was, interfering with my basic ability to eat food, which, the end game of that is starvation. So it was pretty bad. And my memory was also bad because I was talking to my mom about this recently, and she told me that she had taken me to the emergency room like 7 times because I was having a panic attack and I demanded to be brought to the emergency room. And I had totally forgotten that that happened even once. And I still only have a vague memory of it happening once. And so I think my memory at that time was also very bad. And then what saved me was my teeth rotted out. So I went to the dentist and I found that I had 15 cavities and I needed 2 root canals. And so I was very interested in saving my teeth. I thought, maybe it was because I stopped using fluoridated toothpaste. Maybe it was this or that. I don't know. But at the time I was in undergrad and I was a history major, and I worked at the dining hall washing dishes. And the manager of the dish room was very interested in the work of Weston Price. And he gave me a pamphlet on raw milk. And he said, hey, what do you think about this? And this pamphlet on the raw milk talked about this guy, Weston Price, who discovered the key to immunity to tooth decay. I was like, what? Immunity to tooth decay? I have to read this book. So I went up to I think it was the 24th floor of the UMass Amherst Library. It's, I think, one of the tallest libraries in the world. And I took out, they had the 1945 edition, which was the second edition of Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston Price. And I read it. And so when I read it, what Weston Price did was he spent 25 years as a dental researcher researching the causes and consequences of tooth decay. And it had been rumored that there were many native groups who were not exposed to modern civilization who had immunity to tooth decay. And America at the time had a terrible diet. And we were sort of headed into the Great Depression, on the cusp of it. And we had just invented white bread and white sugar and Wonder Bread and everything like that. And so people were just eating the worst diet imaginable. And we hadn't fortified bread either. So it was like we took everything out, not knowing that there were vitamins that we robbed of it. And so he said, being a scientist, I need controls. But there are no controls here because everyone has terrible teeth. And so he heard that these groups existed, and he was like, well, then maybe they can be my controls. And so he went out and he tried to find these groups where, on all different continents in many, many different lands, he looked for groups where he could compare very similar genetics and very similar culture, and where people still eating their traditional diet, and versus 10 miles away, a port opened up, and they had recently transitioned to white flour, white sugar, white bread, and canned goods. And so, and in some cases, when he would find that in a town where they were transitioning, sometimes it was like the younger brother started eating the imported foods. The rest of the family grew up on the other foods. And he would be able to see these very well-controlled examples of what happens when you switch to these foods. And what he found was a very consistent phenomenon that could be replicated on every continent, on all different kinds of climates at different altitudes with different people, different genetics, languages, culture, everything. None of those things changed the fact that when people went from their traditional diet to their modern diet, they developed terrible dental health. And so rampant cavities in the first generation, defective dental arches in the second generation, defective facial development, especially the middle and lower third of the face, which would make people more likely to be nose breathers, which would make people more likely to have narrow cheeks and narrow jawline. And that was his main thing, but he also, when he could, looked at other aspects of their health. And he didn't call his book Nutrition and Tooth Decay. He called it Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, because what he found was that wherever you found this rampant tooth decay in the first generation and defective dental arch and facial development in the second generation, you also found dramatically more cancer, dramatically more heart disease, dramatically more gallbladder problems, dramatically more, everything that was associated with just generally the problems that you have in modern society, just no one knew that they were due to modern society. And so, his data was better on teeth because he was a dental researcher first and foremost. A lot of his other data was by talking to doctors who in the regions who worked with both groups or whatever. But the general trend was there that there was just widespread physical degeneration from eating those foods. Now, there's a component to this that we would look back and say is obvious, which is, of course, white flour, white sugar, and canned goods are worse for you than whole foods. And, a vegan would probably agree with that. But what was fascinating to me was that he also documented the traditional bodies of knowledge about nutrition in these groups. And they didn't know what the vitamins and minerals were, but they knew that this food does this, that food does that. And so they would often go at great lengths, walking up a mountain to get a plant food that was a great source of iodine, for example, or, because of the soil it was grown in, or, going out to in dangerous situations to obtain certain types of shellfish or whatever. And even on one island, he found that the people who lived up in the mountains considered shellfish so important that when they were at war with the people on the seacoasts, at night, the people on the seacoasts would deliver shellfish to this wall where the people from the mountaintop would trade plant foods. And so one would bring them when the other wasn't there, then the other would bring them when the other wasn't there. He didn't talk about in the book, but I later found out through doing research that this was because most of the wars were started because if the people in the mountains went 3 months without animal foods, they would start eating the people on the seacoast. And they would specifically go after the fishermen because they ate the most fish. And then they would take their livers out and eat that because they knew that the livers of the fishermen were the most nutritious way to get their animal products. So actually the people on the seacoast were trying to appease them by giving them enough shellfish that they didn't need to cannibalize them and eat their own livers. And so Price summarized this as basically traditional diets were very different across these different groups, but there were some similarities. And one of those similarities was everyone can put a special emphasis, even with often spending a lot of effort to get at least one thing out of these 4 groups. That is the animal life of the sea with a special emphasis on shellfish, the organs of animals, egg yolks and dairy products, and the 4th is small animals like frogs and insects. And so not everyone ate insects, not everyone ate small frogs, not everyone ate eggs, not everyone ate dairy, not everyone ate organs, not everyone ate shellfish, but everyone put very special emphasis on obtaining at least one, if not 2 or more of those types of foods. And so I came out of this, when I went vegan, I had this idea that like meat is where you got your protein and vegetables were where you got your vitamins. And we don't need as much protein as everyone thinks we do, so we can just go vegan. And then I'm reading Price and I'm like, wait a second, there's important vitamins in shellfish that people aren't getting. And then I thought about it, not only was I not eating these foods, but like actually most of the omnivores I knew weren't eating shellfish or organ meats on very frequently, especially organ meats. And so I'm trying to fix my teeth, and I reorganized my diet according to Weston Price's principles. And by complete accident, I fixed my mental health. And the defining moment that I realized that this happened was 2 or 3 months later. I was in the dining hall, and I saw this guy pick up a stack of plates and take one out from the middle. And I paused. I said in my head, man, that guy's a freaking weirdo. And then 2 or 3 seconds later, I stopped and like, wait a second. And then I remembered a couple months ago, I never took a plate without doing that. But that was the absolute least neurotic thing that I did. And so even in the dining hall, I would often take 20 minutes to search for a glass from among the clean glasses that was clean enough for me to drink out of. And I told you the story before about how sometimes I couldn't eat because I threw my veggie burger across the room because I convinced myself that it had been tampered with. And so, here's this guy who is engaging in probably among the most common neurotic food behaviors in the population. The top plate is more dusty, whatever. And I'm judging him for it because it's so foreign to me. And that means that I had completely forgotten the sort of exceedingly more pathological behaviors that I had been engaging in myself systematically and universally 2 or 3 months ago. And so it was at that point that I realized that I had made so many leaps and bounds in my mental health that I just forgot about the borderline psychosis that I had a few months before that. And at that point, and I never had the intention of fixing my mental health. And so at that point, I realized that, I had just struck the gold mine of dietary principles that, at least for me. And I am a strong believer in individuality, and I'm a strong believer that people's needs change over time. But there's definitely something about me, and I don't think I'm alone in it, where nutrient-dense animal products, along the lines of what Weston Price emphasized, are central requirements for me to be optimally healthy.
Wow, that's incredible. So did you get your teeth fixed by the foods that you ate? And then eventually, where did you go with your diet, and what do you eat now?
Yeah, so a lot of the dental work that I needed, I had done during that transition phase, because I discovered Weston Price after I was already like months into getting fillings and stuff. But I did have a couple cavities that had appeared to develop and then healed themselves in the year and a half that followed. And that was one thing that Price put special emphasis on, was that he could make cavities go away without drilling and filling by changing people's diets. And then I also sort of put a stop to the aggressive formation of new cavities as well. What I eat now, things evolve over time and my needs change over time. I would say, like, during COVID this year, I live in New York City, and so life has been kind of dull here. And I made a deliberate choice this year to allow myself to gain some weight and put more emphasis on comfort foods and pleasure foods, because I knew that I needed a very hefty psychological buffer against being locked in my apartment most of the time. And so I gained a lot of weight this year. More than I intended to let myself gain. The gyms just opened up a few weeks ago. They were closed for like 6 months. And so now my diet is, before my diet was very much, it wasn't terrible, but it was just, a lot of emphasis on comfort foods. Certainly wasn't very carnivore-y. Right now I'm focusing mainly on fat loss, and my diet is basically high protein, low fat carnivore during most of the day. And then for my evening meal, I have maybe a third to a half the plate is meat, and then the other rest of the plate is mixed low carb veggies on non-workout days, and then I include starches on the evening after my workouts. And so that's basically the idea is when I deplete my muscular glycogen, my workouts, I'll allow myself some extra carbs. But I find that's working very well just from the effect of protein being very filling. It's definitely working from just kind of keeping me running on relatively little fuel, but still feeling good during the day. And that's the main idea behind it.
Awesome. So you were feeling pretty good nowadays. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story with us. I know you talk about supplements, and you have a book about that coming out. And can you tell us where people can connect with you and find out more about your information?
Yeah. Masterjohn.phd.com is the clearinghouse for all of my information. I got a lot of free content that comes out on a more or less daily basis there. Also have some things you can purchase. You can do consulting with me. You can purchase my ebook on nutritional status, and you can pre-order my book on vitamins and minerals coming out. And then you can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us and giving us a wonderful story.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was great.
Have a great day.
Take care.